I'm driving along in the car. There are 8 people in the car. My mother, my father, my 5 siblings and I. And we've been driving now for around about 30 hours across the Australian outback. And I'm so excited because we're just about to arrive at one of my favourite places in the world. As we pull into the drive, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I see 2 figures sort of hunched over in their nightgowns. And it's my grandmother and my grandfather, or as I know them, Nana and Pop. This is something that we do every year. They live in a tiny 2-bedroom house in Canberra, in Australia. And the 8 of us move in for 6 weeks and live with them every school holidays. And I have 2 really great memories as a child of these holidays. The first, as soon as I get out of the car, I can smell. It's egg and bacon pies, my favourite food in the whole world. I can still remember that feeling of biting through the crust and into the juicy contents within. But the other memory is one that has touched me very deeply in my life. And that is of having cigarettes with Pop on the veranda. Every day, I'd get to do a grown-up thing with him. After dinner, he'd sit out on the veranda and he would smoke 1 cigarette. And we would talk about all manner of things. And I remember one day, it was when I was 7, I asked him a question. I said, "Pop, why do you smoke a cigarette every night after dinner?" And he said to me, "It's a very serious question, and smoking is a very serious thing to do." He said, "My cigarette is at the same time the highlight of my day, and it's also the hardest part of my day." He said, "To smoke a cigarette, it feels really, really good. But also, there's a man called Gandhi, who you'll get to learn about when you're older. And he said that your habits create your values. And every time I smoke a cigarette, I just wonder what value I'm creating for myself every time I do that, because I do it every single day." And I've never heard about habits or values or anything before. And I didn't realise at that moment, but he had started me on a course of inquiry that would span my entire life. All through school, I was fascinated by the habits that people would engage in. Why would they do this and not do that? And then I went to university and I studied. And I studied and I studied and I studied. And no matter how hard I studied, they wouldn't let me do experiments on people. So I left the university and I joined the corporate world, where I could do lots of experiments on people. The field of behavioural psychology has evolved a huge amount over the past 25 years. And the thing that's been really great in the last 5 years is there's a lot more experimental machinery that we can use to map the way that people's brains work. And they've done a wonderful experiment just recently where they linked a huge range of people, different ages, different roles, different genders, up to these machines while they were just doing everyday tasks. And what they were able to tell from this experiment was, when they were doing everyday tasks, whether or not the task that they were doing was something that they were doing consciously, whether they were aware that they were doing it, or whether it was unconscious, involuntary, habitual. Does anyone want to make a guess as to what percentage of behaviour of an average human being in their average everyday life is completely unconscious? This is to say that the person does it and their brain does not fire in any noticeable way to register for them that they're doing it. Any guesses? Throw them out there. 90%. 90%? 47? 100%? Interesting. What they found from this experiment is that of every action that we take, a full 40% are completely unconscious, and about another 40% are what's called preconscious. So these are actions where the brain does fire, but not in a way that we can really tell. So this is, for me, a fascinating insight into the life of an average human being. We are not aware of almost half of the things that we're doing. These are our habits. So let me just define a habit for you. It's not too complicated, actually. A habit is a routine which is caused by a trigger. This trigger is reliably causing the routine. And the routine reliably leads to a predictable reward. That's what a habit is. When this happens in our brain, we stop noticing that we're doing it. And the behaviour naturally becomes automatic. This is how the human brain works, whether we like it or not. For a very long time, people were fascinated by habits because they thought that habits only formed accidentally or randomly. But in recent years, we've discovered that we can have a huge impact on our ability to influence the habits that we have. For me, there are three really compelling reasons to learn these skills. First of all, when we learn habits, then the activity becomes automatic, which means more results for less effort. It's like a success machine when we do this. The second thing is, habits are super hard to learn. They're like so hard to learn, but they're also super hard to forget. Who's quit smoking here? Man, congratulations. That is just like a mammoth task. To erase architecture from your brain. This is real tissue within your brain. To erase that architecture is very, very difficult. And the same thing counts for positive habits. When people start exercising and they get into a true embedded habit, it's actually very difficult for them to stop. This is why you see 70-year-old people running marathons. It's their habit. They get up, they run. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And finally, I haven't seen a form of personal growth that is so infinitely scalable. What I love about habits is they become automatic. That is, they disappear to our perception. And so we don't need to keep scheduling them in all the time. If we truly deeply embed a new habit, it by definition becomes automatic. So once we've dealt with one habit and that's working, we can forget about it and we can start another one, and we can start another one, and then another one. And our life doesn't get cluttered by this behaviour because it's all starting to happen automatically in our brain. Now, just a question around some of the metrics. People have been asking me, how many habits can I make in a month? Or these sorts of questions. Just a guess from you guys again, how many new habits will the average human being generate in any 12-month period? Just if we took an average of the whole population. Any guesses? 2? 1? 1 or 2? A habit that has gone to be completely unconscious. So, 500? Maybe none? Exactly none. This is really interesting about the way the human brain works, is that our brain doesn't generate habits very much. What our brain generates is triggers, and it generates routines, and it generates rewards. It generates a lot of new triggers, and it generates a lot of new routines and a lot of new rewards. But also, the frameworks that are built in, these loops that form, they swap around. And so truly new habits very rarely form, but what we see is a lot of swapping. And this is where you see people, their weight goes up and down. Or they quit smoking and they start smoking again, or they do these things. And so the average person, once their basic habit frameworks are formed, they don't tend to generate many new habits. What we see mostly is people taking different routines and putting them onto the same trigger, or different rewards associated with a new routine. Now, from a neurological point of view, a lot of people ask me, if I become like the super professional habit master, the guru, how many habits could I embed in 1 year? Any guesses? 9? 3? 1? Technically speaking, theoretically, if you were like a ninja of habits, 17. From what we know at the moment of neurobiology. 17 in 1 year. But practically, in my, sorry? About 21 days. Yeah, you got it. But practically, in my experience, 12, that's what we see a lot of people doing if they really want to hack habits.
That's for good habits. Bad habits we take.
Interestingly, no. Because good habits and bad habits don't look different to the brain. This is interesting. Good habits, bad habits, the brain doesn't differentiate.
Why is there such a big difference between what said about that? Because one way you're 21 days and yesterday I heard 66 days, for example.
Good question. I'll come to that. Yeah, and I don't have a lot of time to go into that. To fully embed a habit, there are different steps. There's a step called the embed. The embed takes 21 days. And the embed sucks. Everything else is fine. Everything else is pretty easy. So you can run it like a production line. You can stack the other parts over the other parts, but you can really only embed one at a time. So 12, but I've done 12 in a year and it sucks. It really sucks. I'm a lazy guy, right? I want easy habits. I want easy wins. Really, for me, I try and do 3 in a year. Then I'm only doing 1 at a time. I can get it really done. And I know that it's going to last for the rest of my life, which is what I care about with habits. It's not that I have a lot of good habits, but when I eliminate something, it's gone. I don't eat sugar. I won't eat sugar ever again. Sugar tastes terrible to me. It tastes awful. I don't know why. My brain makes it taste awful, right? It's just automatic.
What is the one
That's the longer conversation, but it's to do with lucid dreaming and lucid wakefulness, so it's more complex. But I'm happy to talk about it.
Is a habit daily, or if you do 2 times a week, something is that a habit?
Almost always a habit will be something that happens at least daily. Almost always. This is why people that go to the gym 7 days a week keep going to the gym. Whereas if they go every second day or every third day, it's not usually a habit. That's a routine usually. So, maybe 3 a year. So I just wanted to show you just a little bit more detail about what goes on in our brain around habits. We have all these triggers, different triggers. They're just random, based on our experiences in the world. You know what a trigger is? Like, you know, when someone says something, you want to punch them in the face? It's a trigger. Something happens in the outside world, and it makes our brain react. Then we have routines. You know, I get up in the morning, all different routines. And, you know, I put my pants on and then I brush my teeth. This is a routine. And then I have rewards. Like, my wife gives me a kiss. Or my kids say, I love you, Daddy. Or something. A reward. Something that makes me feel good. Anything that's pleasant. Now, the thing that happens sometimes is that a trigger goes and it causes a routine. So a trigger, we get stimulated and we make a response. This is human functioning. Trigger, response. And then something good happens. And when something good happens, something really weird happens in our brain. It reports back to the trigger center and says, hey, that made good.
The reward doesn't need to come instantaneously, or
The quicker the better. The quicker the better. I was yelling at someone the other day, just put sugar in the mouth. Just put sugar in. Like, seriously. The brain is very, very basic in this regard when it comes to habits. And if the trigger happens again, and the routine happens again, and the reward happens again, if this is a reliable loop, the brain actually grows more tissue. And it creates a habit loop. This is a physical thing in your brain. This is why it's hard to quit smoking. Because you actually have to make your brain die to get rid of it.
So, for example, dieting and not eating, is that like such a big problem? Because the reward?
Yeah. So if we do not, also because we're not necessarily conscious of the reward, or we don't notice it as well.
Can you give us a really quick example?
Yeah, with exercise. Yeah? People go to boot camp. I want to kick boot camp's ass because boot camp makes you feel crap. But there's a whole lot of exercise that makes you feel good, like going for a walk along your neighbourhood street and saying hi to people. That's exercise that is instantly rewarding. We choose the sorts of routines that don't give us reliable instant rewards. And then we get mad that it doesn't form a loop. But if we don't create the correct conditions, it's not going to form a loop. This is what we're always trying to do with habits, is create a loop. Everyone focuses here on the routine. I must go for 21 days to the gym. No, I must reward myself for 21 days for a behaviour. This is the key. So, once we understand this loop, we can stop just focusing on the routine. I need to stop smoking. And we can say, what happens just before I smoke? Why do I smoke? You can have 3 people smoking in a group, and all 3 are smoking for different reasons. They all got triggered for different things. And also, they're also receiving different rewards. One of them is getting a nicotine hit, the other one's socialising. Different rewards for the same routine. And so people say this is how you quit smoking, but without understanding the personal experiences that you have that are triggering the behaviour, and also the rewards that matter to you, it's very, very difficult to break a loop like this, and it's very difficult to create new ones around the behaviours that you want to replace with. So when I first started hacking my own habits, there were 3 things for me which really made a big difference. The first one was to stop thinking about the routine. Everyone focuses on the routine because that's the thing that you want to change. But if I can get really present to rewards that matter to me, things that make me feel good, and make these rewards associate with a routine that I would like to be performing, and if I can figure out the triggers, you know, one thing that I realised is I just reached for my phone. You see that? Because it's normally in there. I reach to touch my phone when I feel loneliness. This is something that we can all learn. Why do I reach for my phone? You know, why do I check my email? What happens just before? This is a key thing. If I can figure out the things that are triggering my behaviours and the rewards that matter to me, I have a huge amount more control over my habits. The second thing is I hate New Year's Eve. I hate it. I'm like the Grinch of New Year's Eve because on New Year's Eve people make 3 resolutions and they try and do them all at the same time. There is no scientific evidence anywhere that suggests that trying to rewire 3 loops in your brain at the same time is more effective than trying to do them one at a time. Just one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, please. And the final thing is, instead of saying, I want to quit smoking, say, I have a smoking habit, and I have a walking habit. That's interesting. How can I substitute a walking habit for a smoking habit? What does a walking habit have to look like to replace that smoking habit? I need to know what the whole of my smoking habit looks like and then envisage a walking habit that would be compelling in relation to the triggers that it satisfies and the rewards that I receive. Then I've got a hope. Question? No.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like women tend, like younger women, they tend to smoke because they want to stay slim.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a problem because then they kind of say, if I quit smoking, then I will get fat. You know? I mean, maybe be worried of that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They're very clear about the reward.
So,
Yeah. The reward is very, very clear. So if we can find something else that gives that reward, we can substitute. Yeah. But it needs to satisfy a reward like that. If it doesn't satisfy that type of reward, good luck. Really good luck.
Can you say that I'm going to stand for the reward, my bad habit, or the one that replaces, I'm trying to substitute with another habit that will replace the reward.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you could have a different trigger. If you're getting that reward, then you're likely to succeed. Yeah, because you're satisfying that reward structure. So if you satisfy that reward structure, it's going to stop feeding back to the old trigger. It's going to be feeding to a new trigger. So imagine here we've got a new loop that's forming. This is the new loop that we're forming. This old loop is going to start to die off. Yeah? Can you see that? That brain tissue will actually die for you. That's what you want. No? All good?
What I find
find a problem in when I'm trying to change my habits. So in a lot of them it works because the reward is big enough and interesting enough to get there. But for example, some rewards, like saying, imagine I would keep up with this for 21 days, I'm going to splurge myself into shopping. The problem is within those 21 days, I'll tell myself like, yeah, well, I can do it now too, right? Because I can.
Yeah, but this is not a reward, yeah? A
So,
reward
yeah.
needs to happen every single time I exhibit the behaviour. Straight away. Sugar in your mouth. Yeah? That end reward, it's got nothing to do with the growth of your brain tissue that's going to help with this.
Can you help us with how you name those rewards or not?
What do you like?
How do you find the appropriate?
Yeah? Yeah? So the way that I find appropriate rewards is I look at my existing habit loops. This is why I ask you to start to look at your own habit loops, because I don't know the sorts of things that you reward yourself with. But if you have a look at your existing habits, good and bad habits are just as useful as good. They will provide you with just as much information about the sorts of rewards that you desire. You know? I like to move. For me, movement is a big reward. I didn't realise that until I started looking. You know? For me, sometimes movement is better than nicotine, which is crazy, because nicotine's like badass. Any other quick questions? I'm kind of done, so... I'm going to be here all day, and I'm an EO member, so any questions, hit me up. I love this stuff. Thank you.